Know Thyself is dedicated to the exploration of the most rewarding task an individual can ever embark on, the journey to find oneself. Our intention is to investigate the universal principles that have equipped our species to seek the treasure of all treasures. This is the Know Thyself podcast.
Well, hello.
Welcome to the Know Thyself podcast. I'm here with Daniel.
I said my hi too early. This is how excited I was. But hello, everyone.
I'm Eduardo, and it's good to see you on the Sunday morning, my friend. I'm excited to, take the time to not only have these conversations with you, but so many questions in the last few weeks that have kind of been reserved for this moment. So I'm eager. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that as we've been connecting through these last couple of weeks, one of the things that we've really been observing in our life is just the intensification of life when we live with this intention of application, and we're noticing cycles and patterns that are presenting themselves, and our awareness is becoming very heightened to these things as well. And you and I both have lived in this a little bit of an alchemical furnace, which I think with our audience would probably be something that is very much resonates with them as well from the period of time that we just went through. And so I was excited to kind of have this conversation today about just how intention brings a little bit of intensity to that evolutionary process of self-unfoldment, and, kind of just allowing for that to blossom, rather than finding that sometimes, we're kind of whittling the flowers away ourselves, or maybe stomping on the flowers when we should just be letting them grow. So, yeah, man, I'm always excited to see your face.
Yeah, dude, it is really good to see you, man. And I like what you said. I want to go back to that alchemical furnace, because, now that we've introduced cycles and patterns, and we've introduced other processes that take, all of us to different octaves, or at least allow us to evolve, we did start the season with speaking about application. And so just talking to you is already sort of a reflection on maybe some of the steps or choices I've made in my life. When you ask me how you've been, I can go back and realize, is it even a story worth telling? Because the application, or the opportunity for application presented itself, it was executed, and then we moved on. Whereas I would love to tell you stories about how everything failed, because, there's a good story in that. And then you get sort of this connection between your listener who wants to sort of give advice or give some kind of empathetic response. But lately I feel like I've been kind of alone in it. And it's not alone as in a loneliness sort of way, but more of okay, this is what's happening to you. How are you moving through this? Did you do that right? And then when you did, can you reflect on it? And the reflection might be short because there's something else that's coming around the corner that might be equally heavy. And that's where I've been, and so all these conversations that we've had in the past, and the things that, just foster curiosity for being a better version of what I can do, they all kind of have presented themselves in the last few months. And I really wanted to talk to you about that today, because, we've spoken in between these, monumental shifts that happen. And we've talked about what these things represent. We've talked about all kinds of theories and philosophy that we are always excited to talk about. But there's these things that, these patterns that are going to continue to show up as far as our planetary energy and things that affect our emotions and the society we lived in. All these things are going to affect us one way or another. And when you start noticing the patterns, again, you find a way to navigate. And one of the patterns that you talked about that I really liked was the episode you did on the moon, because the moon affects all of us in one way or another, even the way it illuminates a lot of dark areas in the sky. It's always very reassuring when you do have that light from the moon to kind of guide you. But when we talked about that episode, a lot of people commented on how they were glad we were talking about what it meant to understand a moon cycle. And so I have so many questions about the eclipse that passed, Mercury in retrograde. We've talked about Mercury in retrograde before, but a couple of times you and I were in conversation.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And I want to talk about retrograde, but I want to tap in something that you just said, which is what we kind of feel is like when we have that intention of the self-awareness of these cycles and patterns of how they're operating in nature,
Mm-hmm.
as well as getting mirrored inside of ourselves, there is this realization of the responsibility of, oh, I'm a I'm the causal factor of everything that happens to me in my life. Now there is other
Mm-hmm.
energies that's manifesting around me, but like how I react to situations, that's fully on me. I could have my tribe of brothers, sisters, and just, deep, deep connections with other sentiment, other life. We could have our romantic partners, we could have our children and our family, but how we actually navigate this five sense reality in this classroom is entirely up to us. And there's kind of
Right.
that, like, it's quite the responsibility that we kind of take on. And, and I'm not saying this is something that you've done, because as just a friend that's observed you for so long, you are one of the first person who I've seen actually extract them from this process. But the blaming of our life on others, the blaming of our life on our
Mm.
circumstances and like the world that we find ourselves in. Now, obviously, the vibrations of our cultures, our societies, and other people have an effect on us, but we always have the ability to change how that effect actually influences us. You know what I mean? We always have that free will of how we adjust to situations, but it's the great work, which is this independent process of unfoldment. And so there is kind of this lonely component of knowing that you are the end all of like how you develop. And again, we can have beautiful people in our life that enrich that, but the relationships of the beautiful people in life is a result usually of like our character, of who we've been able to attract into our life. So it's always the causal factor is the I, which is the self, and everything that gets attracted or gets repelled is due to the vibrational, outpull that it's doing, as well as its like inward pull, kind of like the out and the in, the ebb and the flow. And so, yeah, with cycles and patterns, we also, deal with that other law of the law of rhythm. So with the added attention and awareness that's applied to natural law principles and the cycles and patterns, we also start to see the natural law of rhythm making its occurrence and understanding the ebb and the flow, like you were saying. One of the things that I know that you and I could personally connect about is that work energy and our labor was really called into us at this time period in life.
Mm.
And it was weird because our labor was pulling us in so much other energy that our other labors were not being able to be balanced, but it was what it was supposed to be. It was like, no, this is a time of reflection. And so, it's kind of funny how that all operated with what the question is that you were going to kind of go into. Was it Mercury retrograde? Is that what we were just about to chop up together?
Oh, we totally can whenever you're ready. I was just going on a tangent because again, I haven't seen you in a little bit of time here, about that, the influence that sort of moves the energy that flows through us.
Mm-hmm.
We have talked about that Kundalini energy, and we have talked about even mentioning a lot more in depth about the Wu Wei, right? The action in non-action. But all of these things can be very easily challenged when there's sort of external influences, in this case, maybe planetary or maybe, societal or political. They sort of shift the energy and get you sort of away from the path that you may you might be getting to, but there's this like trickiness there with that where you're like, I was just so close, but that's part of the path.
Mm-hmm.
It's like getting close enough is what's going to make you to be accurate when you get there, when you're supposed to be there. You know what I mean? Like, to get to that perfect center, you must, divert from the path a bit in order to understand that the length from one end to the other, as it makes its way straight like an arrow, it takes time. It's sections to build that arrow and its, ability to go into one direct path to center. And again, that's my experience with it. But, again, it's challenged by certain aspects that are, evolve our or involve rather our influence on this planet. You know what I mean? Like what's happening out there and what's causing it, and how can we fix it? All these things sort of push us away. So yeah, just kind of want to get into that. Mercury in retrograde is something you and I talked about on the phone, as just catching up as friends, and you're like, hey, this is what's occurring right now. How are you feeling? And like, yeah, yeah, it's an interesting energy right now. What about you? And so,
Yeah, absolutely. And, in regards to Mercury retrograde, that just like the planet Mercury really will be something that we dedicate a whole episode to, just because of not only what we're supposed to do in that time. For a
mhm.
lot of us, it's a great time to actually go inward and kind of have the internal dialogue. External dialogue can be blocked, but again, that depends very much on your natal chart of how Mercury retrograde is going to affect you, in what area it's going to affect you. Will really tell you about, from your natal chart, as well as like the studying of transits. But it's a time that we can almost feel like we can get deceived. It's a great time for the trickster archetype of Mercury to show itself. And a lot of
Mm,
times this has with like electricity in other kind of flow states, like technology and things like
yeah,
that. But all forms of electricity, even our own internal, because we are just a conductor of that universal life force. It's moving through us. Well, there can also be
right.
disconnections at that time, or an abundance of energy into one area of the consciousness. And we can really explore that in a very profound way. There's things that come to your awareness during Mercury retrograde that's not always in your active component of like what you're isolating your thought component of your awareness of thought on that moment. And so it's kind of
Totally.
this unique period. And, you kind of talk about environment too, of the pressures of environment. So we do have these planetary cycles and patterns. And then there's also that understanding that, matter, like Mother Earth, it is magnetic by nature because it like magnetizes the universal life force down, right? It almost deduces it down into containers for it so it can learn itself. Well, that magnetism of it is magnetizing. And so not only when you go out into nature are you looking and you're like magnetized by the significance of it. Well, matter also has a darker component, which is like what we perceive as the carnal carnival, right? The Ferris go reel, the merry-go-round, just going round and around, right? And we spoke about this before, I think just you and I, but like
Hmm.
in the carnal carnival, it's very easy to get distracted by the music, the sounds, the flashing lights, and you just go round and round and round. But the thing is that's not where the meaning is. That's just motion. And so as we live towards a life that, really sets its foundation and its principles to utilize meaning as like that first cause that like directs our action, we gain more significance and we can kind of get out of the carnal carnival because like the carnal carnival has games, where you can win prizes, but you can get any prize that you want, especially when you get good at the games. But like the only prize you need is not provided in that. And so even as we kind of have this dance with learning these finer astrological substances, we also have to learn the reality and the form and the arena that we're partaking in this consciousness. And so that has its own cycles and patterns. That has its own seducing effects. It like literally seduces us in to give us their time and its energy. And it's all kind of a test. Natural law is seeing if you're aware of yourself. And if not, it will take your
Hmm.
energy into other ways, natural law in the universal mother, its ultimate ends is like the realization of the wholeness of what the whole universe is. And so those are its ends. And so all of its means are completely justified, which is like when you violate natural law, you feel pain. Well, it's justified to natural law because you weren't learning what it was trying to teach you. And so it's actually going to cause pain because it's like, it doesn't care about your feelings or your poor choices. It has to teach you the lesson every time. And that's what we're seeing on a global
Right.
level. That's what that's why we see the world we're in is because as a collective, we're denying these natural law principles. As a collective, we're running away from the shadow inside of ourselves. So of course that's going to get projected onto the outside world. And we feed it. We feed that shadow with every little automation. And anytime we disassociate from ourselves to kind of get stuck on that carnival ride. And again, it's a great place to experience. But it's not a place that like you want to stay. It's a construct for experience. The carnal carnival can also be the carnal classroom if you utilize it and approach it in the right way. And the more you start approaching it like a classroom rather than like spring break, no parents, well, you get like, you learn more about like what independence is. You know what I mean? It's not just, it's not just a ride where you go round and round. Does that make sense? Can you tell I'm excited to talk to you?
Oh, absolutely, man. I'm very excited to talk to. I mean, I think for what it's worth, our friendship will always be one of the most cherished things I have, because the fact that we can talk like this, and you're observing the world, through your own eyes, and as am I. But when we come together and have these thoughts guided by, certain philosophies or base principles, it's for a reason why we're into this. It's not so much that we explore history for, the sake of all the mysteries that are in it. More so, we explore philosophies like these because the application was written for us to be better, but we keep repeating, and so we see it happening, but it's repeating itself. As we talked about this with even sections of time, like the yugas, or even other formats of time that say that this is all a cycle. We're still living in this, and as it's happening, it is really occurring in a way that it's not necessarily difficult to capture and understand, but if you don't know where you're going, in terms of like how this is moving, then you're sort of looking at things in a chaotic way. Like, things are in chaos at all times, but there's sort of an order to this chaos if you sort of can see through, what's actually occurring in between the lines. And I think that that's where everyone has a difficult time. I feel for the people who struggle emotionally. I feel for the people who lose sleep. And I understand, not that I'm a better person because I may not be suffering as much as they are, but what helps the suffering is the understanding of what these things are during such a revolution. Like you talked about AI a little bit, and that in itself we can get into for a while, like how we replicate the feelings of dopamine, or how we can replicate the feelings that give us self-worth. Even those are being made to be sort of synthetic. And we're as by nature, we're asking for more in return, but at doses that are at a dose that's too high and too unrealistic, that causes an equal amount of crash. And I think you meet people like that, and they're not sure why they're feeling so low, or but
yeah,
I don't know.
Absolutely, man. No, absolutely. And that's what we're finding ourselves in a very interesting situation, because there is so much, non-awareness of that shadow, and that animalistic automation is happening because there's unincorporated parts of ourselves. And we're seeing that projected in the collective. We're seeing more of a tie to this automatic android response to life. And now there is going to be processes that are automatic in your life for sure. Like you're only aware of 15% of what's happening in your consciousness, but you want to utilize that as an alchemist to make sure that all your automated patterns are benefiting the unfoldment of your soul. Automation is beyond, that's going to happen. Routine is going to happen. It depends if you make that routine into a ritual, and so it all comes down to meaning preceding motion. Motion and meaning are two ways that we've always we talk about the ancients really understood the meaning of life, where the more modern individual understands the motion of life. Well, one isn't better than the other. It's more of an order of operations. One precedes the other. One is the cause and the other is the effect. And when they're working in that way, that's the natural principle in its proper unfoldment, because meaning did precede motion in the creation of the universe. And that's going to be something that we're also going to explore, going back more into that creation story, because one of the reasons we don't know where we're going is because we don't remember who we are. And we forgot who we are. We're in this amnesia, right? And that's why you really have to study the story of creation to understand that what creation is doing here is the same thing that you're doing. And that's why it's called, the great work of learning yourself. Well, that's what the universe is trying to do in this vessel that we call creation. And so meaning preceding motion is what we kind of try to move to do. And when we know that there's meaning, we can approach things like depression. We can approach things like anxiety, and we can start to look at life in a higher consciousness than where the problem was created. We go to the spiritual rather than trying to deal with that in the mental, because how would you solve a mental problem with a mental idea? You go up an octave, just like, everything looks like chaos until you get a bird's eye view, just like what you were speaking about. Like the bird goes way up high, and it can see that the prairie isn't just a bunch of chaotic mess. The cows are here, the chickens are over here, the house is over here, but it might not look that way from the ground level, and that's why we always try to like step back to try to understand the grand pattern as much as we can. It's universally beyond the brain's capacity. That's something of the all-knowing mind, but that's what we try to get connected to. That's what we're trying to get connected to, We're trying to utilize the brain to collect to like create that electrical generation in the neocortex, the gray matter, to take in more of that universal mind. And so meaning preceding motion. Once we have meaning in its correct place, the motion falls into fulfillment, and it's a cycle, and it's a give and go, and it's a ebb and flow. And that's why we have like action and non-action, but it's the meaning in the motion, and the meaning guides the motion. And, something that's so fascinating about the word meaning is the etymology of meaning is to remember. Your life's meaning is just to remember who you are and why you are here. That's what the meaning of your life is. It's just to remember. It's to remember like the soft whisper inside of the womb when that cosmic mother was like, don't forget who you are. Like, remember who you are. You are it, right? You are it experiencing it. Well, we're like, oh, I'm never going to forget. And then sure enough, we get like shot down that baby tube and we're like, I'm a baby, and we forget everything. You know what I mean? And then we have to start that process of remembering, and we probably contain it more. It's probably more of the individualization process. Like babies are into, there's something about a baby when it looks at you. Even when it's like looking at your aura younger, like you're just like, everything, baby. Like it's like a cat. You're just like, oh, everything about me. But there is a process of an individualization, when we talk about like the subject object moment, when the child is like, oh, I have the ball, I'm holding the ball, but I am not the ball. Like once that starts to happen, we get the isolated persona. We get the I inside of the pod, right? And the awareness of the internal life, but it's in its own self-awareness and its self-identity, and has to remember that its eternal I is part of the all. And that's kind of that process that we're going through. But just how meaning is the energy to keep you going through this. When we go into tough spots like this, and when we feel the resistance of the environment, well, the meaning is like what gets you to get back up. The meaning is like when you're like, I didn't hear no bell. And they're like, really? You're just going to let this guy like punch you a bunch again, St. Daniel? But it's just like, you're getting back up because you're like, I'm not like going down because I remember who I am, if that makes sense. Or we do. We try to. I'm not trying to make a personal subjective statement, more of a mantra for you, everybody else, because like the hero of the story, the savior we've been like waiting for, is the person whose eardrums are receiving this message right now. Like you're the hero that we've been waiting for, Eduardo. Like everybody else in the audience, you are the hero we've been waiting for. Like you are the savior. And it's just once we realize and remember, and we get back to that meaning of like, why am I here? Well, I'm here to learn myself. I'm here to unfold myself. And this is why it's the great work, because that's why the universe is here. Like the containers of Mother Nature are so the universal life force can become localized and like find a pocket to experience life. And that's why all things have life, whether they're sentient or not, because they have atoms in them. Everything's in motion. Everything's in vibration. So, God not only learns himself through yourself, he learns himself through the plastic cup at the fast food restaurant. Like he learns himself through, like a pickle. Like that's God is in there. Like it's a container. That's just the housing unit of the universal life force. And it's showing it's like an expression, but it needs to learn itself through all of these things. And so when we talk about things like the Kali Yuga, that cycle will be temporal. It's like sempiternal. It's over and over again, sempiternal. It's like it will keep coming until we take that responsibility that we were talking about to be like, oh, the evolution of the universe is on our hands. Like once we get to that point of understanding who we are, it fulfills that destiny. And so at the end point of all consciousness, wholeness will be achieved and the universe will pull itself back into itself. But the timeline of that is dependent on like higher forms of consciousness, like humans. Like, cause you forgot that too, because like nature, it abides by the code of consciousness. Animals abide by the code of consciousness. It's only when we become self-aware that we actually can like violate nature, Like a lion doesn't violate natural law. It lives in accordance to it.
Right.
We're the only ones that actually can like ignore it. And I mean, it still causes pain, and we don't notice it until we go through maybe enough cycles of lives or enough pain in our life to actually like gain a respect for your mother, which is the Mother Earth. And she's going to be respected or you're going to die. Like that's the two choices. Like she's got no feelings about it because the ends justify the means, because you were the one that didn't learn the principle. And I'm not saying that like I'm not feeling for death or anything like that. And, you know, we're not saying trying to like be, you know, really dire here, but it's just the idea that like, this is why pain is caused. It's not being aligned with natural law. And then love, truth, and sovereignty becomes manifested when natural law is aligned with. But it's a constant. It doesn't change for nothing. It's immutable. We have to adjust our conscious perspectives to align ourselves with that objective, you know, unfoldment of truth, if that makes sense. And again, did I mention that I'm just so jazzed, cat pajamas happy to see your face?
Oh, you too, man. It's genuine. I feel it for sure, because I know it's been a minute, and when we have seen each other, we've been busy enough to like mention other things that are occurring in our life that I think are just like pressing in that moment. So we don't have this sort of like release of information, because everything you're saying, which is so great, man, it's so nice to talk to you and feel your energy, because like it just reawakens things that I'm reading in between, you know, all kinds of things that are happening in my life personally, whether it be in projects and work and family and love life, all of it, it's all the same and it's all applicable. But it's always that there's always this moment of like opening the mind to the opportunity to take some advice or take some sort of reading into consideration a little more than you have before. For me, a lot of the things you're saying, I've been really leaning on to just more of Marcus Aurelius's, you know, philosophy on life and just his approach to certain ideas in Stoicism. And, you know, a lot of things you're saying when he talks about like not allowing others to affect us a certain way, or you talk about flow and you talk about understanding that flow and not changing the order of nature, and actually understanding the order of nature so that you can live a more fulfilled life, is a lot of the things that resonate with me at the moment because of what I've been reading, you know, with him. I know there's a quote that I've been like dancing around my head, which is, you know, your thoughts take on the color of you, or sorry, your soul take on the color of your thoughts. And you just meet a lot of people that you kind of understand that, you know, that that's not who they are, but you know that they've layered themselves a way that I think they just sort of had to naturally conform to by the options given and presented to them. You know, in their 5 sense reality. And so it's sort of hard to communicate on a more sincere and authentic level at times with individuals, because, you know, they're not either willing to receive the perception you might have of them, or they may judge their perception of they have of you. They might just like treat you in that way without really wanting to get to know you. And so again, nothing here has really happened in terms of a real example for me. It's just things I'm noticing. I'm just kind of taking the sidelines and watching people interact with each other on different, you know, playing fields. And I see the shift, and I feel like a lot of people, rather than adjusting or maybe taking a deeper look, are just more, again, not to say the word conforming, but they're just dealing with it the best that they can. So if something's uncomfortable, rather than finding the reason for its discomfort, they're more just tolerant of it, which makes for a cranky person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, talking to you on these tangents, it's just like a validation of a lot of things you're saying, you know, not only connect to something that's as old as Meditations and Marcus Aurelius's perspective on life from his time, but they're just as relevant to today in one way or another. Not that I can relate to an emperor, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, no, absolutely. And you totally can. You know, my cat, Prince Canoe, he's Prince of everywhere. So you're definitely in his royal guard. But no, I completely agree with you about Stoicism, especially when it comes to application. The Stoics, they live a life of discipline. They've got very much this like
Right.
Capricorn Mars energy tied in with the spirituality. And so when we're looking
Mm.
for like a nice shock, just like we kind of say, like the Taurus, the bull before like a rodeo, and we're not saying we agree with this, but they shock the balls of the Taurus, of the bull, right? To get it like moving so they could do bull riding, I guess. But sometimes you got to do that. And Stoicism does that. It shocks you to life. I mean, in Stoicism, there's gosh, and Eddie V is going to laugh at me because I know I should know the Latin of this, but they have a calendar, Morte Day something, but it's the calendar of death. And it's actually got enough squares for 72 years. And you actually go through and you fill out that square and you black it out every day. Well, that's an amazing awareness to have, to respect the idea of the finiteness of this five sense reality. And so I love the spark that Stoicism can give. I've always been a fan of who's that cool cat? Good looking dude. Oh, Ryan Holiday. You know him? He does a lot of Stoicism work.
Oh, yeah.
Modern guy,
Mm-hmm.
really
Yeah,
good
he's
stuff.
good.
And I think he's done a great job of bringing these Roman philosophers out, because Rome isn't really known for its philosophy quite like Greece is, but there was a really, and it has that Roman feel of like conquering yourself, conquering, your blind response to emotions and the self-aware life. Now I know certain components, people feel like there's not enough sacred feminine in Stoicism. Well, that's great. Take that, like learn that. And then
Right.
maybe you study Wicca on the side. Like you don't have to get your entirety of your spirituality from just one school, but some schools are going to focus in on things that are going to be really beneficial. Like Wicca is great for moon knowledge. Right. And then when I study Druidism, I learn about like tree knowledge and all these kind of things. So they
Right.
all kind of bring their thing. But when you talk about the funny thing about like living outside of these natural laws, well, people don't realize that the clowns are like a mirror for us. Like we're all laughing at the clown because they're being silly, but we're laughing at ourselves because we're being silly. And that's like what the clown
Mm.
kind of represents. Isn't it kind of funny if it represents us laughing at ourselves, even though it's like a mirror of like, this is how you operate here? Again, this is tinfoil hat stuff, so you guys can close your ears. But like, maybe this is why clowns have went from like laughing to like eating your little brother in a storm drain in a Stephen King movie, and like that's why they become so scary. You know what I mean? Like
They have become very
they're not
terrifying.
something that's just like laughter now. Now that's only fear. Well, like maybe it's like,
It is
and
fear.
maybe it's
It
like
is
pay the
true.
piper kind of thing with natural law. Now it's just like, oh, it's not even funny anymore because like now you're really running away from it. So now I got to eat you and your friends. Like they're just trying to live in the like, like where is it? Like a nice little East Coast town. Like let those kids ride their bikes. Stop eating them, clown. But no, it just keeps eating. But it's an interesting thing, thinking about all those things because like the carnival, right? The circus is the circuit. The circuit is like your zodiac wheel. This whole thing is a circuit. You're all containers of you, like universal life force energy. And so this like circuit we live in needs to be consciously perceived and understood for what it truly is. And then in that, like we kind of see with like the conversation with hide and seek, we need to find that universal life force in all things that's contained within that. And that's another thing that we've kind of talked about. But yeah, kind of fascinating. I always like thinking about everything has a purpose. Nothing was an accident, especially even with our creation of these like social things. Etymology. One of the things that we're really going to be looking at doing with like not only the podcast and other kind of information is that understanding that words are more than their definition. What's the acronym of the word? What does it phonetically sound like? What is the root meaning of that word? That's really one of the next steps of application is the observation of that vibration, which is words,
Yeah.
because words, when you're spelling, you're making a spell. And, we curse ourselves a lot with the words that we use. And we've spoken about that before, but I know that's something that you and I've had off record so many conversations on.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of things that we have conversations on, I know we haven't even covered yet on the podcast. And I love how this is all sort of blending together for the listener out there. I know we've talked about a lot of various topics, and you'll hear them be not just re-mentioned or mentioned again in how we're applying them to our life. But this year has been an interesting year that we ourselves can talk on and off the record about what's occurring to us or what experiences we've had and what we've done to deal with that. Even when you were talking about the ebb and flow and we're talking about Mercury in retrograde, for those curious about what's the big deal of Mercury in retrograde, and it's not so much that there's like an active form of harm onto you, but things can escalate if you overthink the idea of flow in reverse. Or you can be like, flow is in reverse and I accept it right now. Now, how am I going to reverse with it? And you're like, that wasn't so bad. And so people are like, I don't understand why everyone's so upset about this whole Mercury in retrograde. But maybe those are the people who've actually understood how to actually shift with the shifts. And I think that's really hard to do because the whole idea of flow can feel like it's one directional, where you're like, oh, flow, right? So the river's going in this direction and it's not going to go upstream. Gravity's going to take it downstream. But believe it or not, things can shift, like the earth could shift and the path of that flowing river will move. And now what are you going to do? Where are your crops going to receive water from? Do you move your crops? Do you move your whole life? Or do you just like wallow into it and say, oh my gosh, my whole life is ruined? It can really trip you up very easily. So, when we talk about this, Carnival, like there is this sort of like idea of knowing what flow looks like or knowing how to handle these shifts that are going to occur, that will, fuel the fear or fuel the blockage, if you will. And then you start to have these like self-fulfilling prophecies where you're like, life is really just kicking my ass right now. Why? And there's this victim mentality, and you go through the whole process and you come out and you're like, okay, it's over, I think, but it's like, it's coming back again probably next year or in a month or in 2 weeks. So being prepared to understand it, I think, is just the ultimate goal for me as we unfold all of these understandings, whether they're aggressive or they're, like the Stoics, as you were mentioning, they have more of a discipline, where in Wu Wei, we talked about how it's, the understanding of action in non-action. Just trying to really manage.
Absolutely, man. And that's what the flow state is. It's the fluidity. And it's that component of allowing it to have that ebb and flow within us. And, as we kind of think about not only, how we respond to that, but what it really comes down to is this: there's a time of the season for all things. And nature is trying to show us when that time of the season is. And so allowing it to fulfill us and to cover all aspects of our life, because again, we know what we want a lot more than we know what we need. There's, when we were studying like the 12 labors of Hercules with the 12 signs of the zodiac, well, those are all energy containers for you. Those are housing units. That's why they're called houses. So they're containers so that universal life force can find that expression. And what the astrology signs are just 12 very deep, lowest common denominator expressions. That universal allness has been broken up into 12 different types to kind of like you understand it all to get back to the whole, right? So it's these 12 big housing units. Well, all of those housing units, just like the housing units we see in our creative environment, are housing units for electricity. And so one of the things that we really utilize these seasons and these cycles of patterns, like the retrograde, the moon cycle, is to move all of the energy in all of those houses. Because if we're not activating like our fifth house, which is like how we create and like what we do for fun in our spare time, well, that housing container holds energy, but the energy is not in a flow state. So it's stagnant. So it doesn't matter if you go home and you try to sleep for 8 hours. There's a part of you that's going to wake up that's not recharged because you didn't empty out that vessel to recharge it. And so,
Yeah, yeah.
using the time of the season. So when we use, Mercury retrograde, like you said, if it really has a time for you to go inward at that time, well, we utilize those couple weeks to go inward, and then it's going to like fulfill that energy movement. So when it goes outward, we have more energy to give. It's always, this is why we adjust to the zodiac signs with the moon, because it tells us the area of life that we need to be like focusing on moving that energy that month. It's an interesting thing, like, especially with the natal charts. Like, I'll be talking to people and they're telling me like, oh, I'm like really busy with work and I love my work, but it's like consumes everything for me. And I'm like, we'll get to the fifth house and we'll be talking about like creativity, or like, what do you do as a hobby? What do you do in your free time? And, they're like, oh, like, I just have to come home and go right to sleep because even when I wake up, I'm tired. And the truth is like, no, actually, you probably need to like go to karaoke with your friends, even though you're going to go to bed 2 hours later. That area of your life is actually going to get a recharge now. It's not just stagnant energy. Stagnant energy is like stagnant water. That's doo-doo water. That water is going to make you sick. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want that water in you. You want like a nice flushing spring, with like a sweet, like riding a horse to it kind of thing. You know what I mean? And just like dunking that's the water. That's the nourishment you want. You don't want like Dasani that was put into a microwave. That's what that is. It's just like, it's not going to nourish you. It's not going to do anything. And so moving those containers. And so the time of the season with that electricity of the Wu Wei and like the whole idea of Taoism, we use that stoicism discipline to be aware of where we are in the time of the season, to know what we should be activating, that active consciousness, to keep all of those energy centers moving so we stay enlightened and we stay lit up, and we're not dim-lidded, because that's what dim-lidded is. It's just like, you're not lighting up the light bulb of consciousness. You might not even be aware of it. You might be, in the Carnival, like just playing games, trying to get a stuffed animal, thinking that that's what you need, or trying to catch that like extra large shirt out when they shoot the t-shirt gun at like sporting events. Like, who's that going to fit? Like, why did I want that so bad as a kid? I was like 3'4" at the time. That shirt would have eaten me. Like, like there's no way I would have got bullied if I went to school with that shirt on. Yeah, it's kind of this interesting thing of how we kind of play these games and, all of these patterns and cycles, but there's a time and season for everything. There's not a right time for just one tarot card is not always like the solution. It's like, what card comes with the moment? Does that make sense?
I like that you said that, because I can't wait to get back into the tarot, especially, coming up soon, is that you do find people who, might feel that level of betrayal where they thought they had it figured out because of maybe some kind of event that sort of showed them or presented them a path. And that might be through the tarot. There might be through, experiences. That might be through accolades. It might be through like some sort of, end period of acquiring an education. And now, but it's like, now you're going to start all over again. And you need to be prepared that it's not all going to be the same as it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, you went to college for 4 years, but you were on a regimented schedule to that environment. And that environment got you hopefully prepared for a new environment you're about to go into. And that new environment, it's not a step up, it's back to reset. And people are like, oh, but, or you accept it, you don't feel tired because you're excited about the purpose that you're plugging into. And so you're not exhausted anymore. As you were talking about going out to karaoke, I like that idea of, trying to get it out. I know that it's a big understanding in big Asian cities of just like always being able to go hard in order to keep the spirit, fulfilled in that realm of like continuous labor. It's not something I want to get into right now. We can talk about that later about that, unnecessary reason to just work so hard. But, finding a flow though, even if you're working hard, may not feel like hard work if you have a clear understanding of the path and what it is that you're doing.
Sure.
But it sounds like you have a good amount of experience on this in the last like even month. I mean, was there anything that you went through between like that period between April it's like April 20th or something, right? Between that and May 15th or May 14th with Mercury in retrograde. Have you had any experiences that you care to share that are kind of like, oh yeah, I had to really work into this, like look at it from a point of view? Because it sounds like you already have. And if you don't want to talk about it, it's all good, man.
Yeah, no, man, I can totally talk about it. I mean, I know the first rule is like I'm not supposed to because it was like I joined a fight club. So like I know I probably shouldn't talk about it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, man.
That would be the coolest, man. I would believe you. I'd be like, oh my gosh.
I would start the fight club. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, like it sounds like you really have applied a lot to it, and realistically speaking. So like whatever you want to mention.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, and of course, because not only did we have retrograde, but we had a solar and a lunar eclipse, which was very of like high intensity. And then as well as my birthday, my birthday was actually on the lunar eclipse. And so always around my birthday, I become very introspective. It's a very much an inward journey for me. I don't really have a lot of external communication. And it's so funny because even when I was a kid, I always enjoyed my friends' birthdays more than I enjoyed my own. It was like a day. Yeah, it was kind of like a day of like emotional stress for me. I would always like, I feel like I would almost, I don't know if I would be, it's not like selfish, but I would just get like, I was just not like, I would celebrate, which might make sense because like my sixth house is in Sagittarius, which is like service. Like I really like celebrating other people's big events, but for my own, especially like the birthday, it was never something that was my favorite day. But I love the opening of awareness that it brings in because I really do kind of go really deep down the spiral staircase every time of the year. And it's always is the gift that I need is like waiting for me at the bottom, even if it's just like, hey, you kind of been a ding dong about this. And I'm like, oh, geez, you're right. And then I like climb back up. Right. But there's always something, there's always some kind of treasure that's taken. And this birthday was an intense birthday, for the fact that it was a full moon in Scorpio during the eclipse and on Venus Day, which was Friday. And then my birthday is on the American celebration of a Mexican holiday, Cinco de Mayo. So that's kind of like a night of, you would say, shenanigans, especially in like the Southwest. And so it was a night of like high intensity. So it was so funny because you were even like, hey man, do you want to like meet up for your birthday? And I'm like, hey man, I'm not going anywhere for my birthday. I am reading a book with my cat. And that was like exactly where I wanted to be. And it wasn't that I didn't want to see you. It's just, that was a spicy salsa night. That was it's Scorpio salsa. Yeah. It's got a sting to it. And so,
I didn't do much either, for that reason.
Yeah.
So I hear you.
Yeah. Big energy, and eclipses are just such spiritually transformational times. We haven't had an eclipse in Aries, a solar eclipse in Aries since like 2017, I want to say, or no, I think it was 2015 actually. And it was really interesting utilizing that time to take that cycle all the way back to where was I the last time we had a solar eclipse in Aries. And that was a very fascinating experience as well, because it's very much the ending and closing of certain cycles and opening of new cycles that I never really expected. And I think it even opened up a cycle of dialogue between you and I in regards to like the conversation about what the podcast is now that it's like 3 years old. We kind of had to approach it as like, hey, this thing's a toddler now. Like, this isn't just a baby that we pass back and forth. Like, it's running around and like, it's got its own personality. It's its own creation at this point, and it really has its own character. It's its own life essence. And so, I think even it was like a moment of like the fathers of the organization coming back together and just having a conversation about like, hey, how do we approach this organism that we've kind of created here? Because it was a very organic like thing that we embarked on. I remember we were still blown away when we had 100 downloads. We're like, who are these 100 people? Because like, there's still people in most of our social circles that don't know that we have a podcast. You know what I mean? Like I would say like probably like 5% of the people that know us. And so that was like a mind-blowing thing. It blows my parents' mind every day when they're like, you still got your voodoo podcast? And I'm like, yeah, I still got my voodoo podcast. They love me for it, but that's what it's like, that kind of thing. And so, man, I don't know where it's going. Did I mention that I'm like so jazzed to see you?
I think you're going in the right direction, man. I think that, you said that not, and I thank you for your answer, man. I know that I kind of asked
Oh yeah,
a
it was my
personal question as far
birthday.
as how you've,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, have you moved through things? But I like that because you did make me aware of what was going on in terms of energies, even on the day of your birthday. So, like, one thing I can say, and I'm using you now as the example of when we apply action, but it's like if Daniel wants to do something for his birthday, he will tell you. If he doesn't, I'm happy because that's what it means for me to be a friend of yours, is understanding what you want, not what I want. And you do a great job, by the way, of celebrating other people's birthdays. But that's awesome that you had that period of introspection and got what you wanted out of it, because that's what you should do for yourself when you have a full, year that goes by, and another moment, another breath that you get to live on this planet. You can have what you want for the day. And especially on your birthday, I think a lot of people want to give you that. Some people want to take, though, because they're like, no, let's celebrate you. And yeah, you're right. With the whole celebration over here in the States of Cinco de Mayo, especially where we live, a lot of people want to use that and sort of reincorporate even more energy to it, where they're like, I know this guy and it's his birthday.
No, it is fun because everybody's always in a good mood. But I remember as a kid, like Mexican food was always my favorite food. And it was always so sad because I could never get it on my birthday because the wait would be so long. And I'm just like, oh, but that's okay. Like these are not real problems. Like if that's your problem, like that's great. But no, it's funny. You know what's kind of funny too,
dude.
is my birthday is Cinco de Mayo, which is Mexico's independence from France. And then my sister's birthday is the independence from Spain, September 16th.
16th.
Isn't that so weird? And I just and all I ever wanted to be when I was growing up is to have like Latin in me. I wanted to be like, because Mexico was the closest culture to it, because like living in the Southwest. And so like I was so much raised on Mexican culture. I just didn't have any, like Eddie V told me I'm like by proxy, but he's like, no, you're accepted now. And I'm like, oh, great. I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, it is the culture that I like really kind of connect with, I think the most growing up in the Southwest. But I have no idea why we even had to bring that up. We can cut that for sure.
No, I like, no, we don't go too much into our personal lives, but the reason being is that as we go into the Tarot and as I go into more tangents about what has happened in the last like month or two of our lives, and how we've reflected on it or how we've applied certain understandings to it, it's good to have this conversation with someone who not only I cover such dense information with, but also have to explain where I might be in my life or what I'm feeling. And it's tricky because, you want to put on that friend hat and just say, oh, it is what it is, I'll get through this. But other times I have the privilege of being able to say like, hey, I think this is what's happening. And, another question I was going to have about in regards to what I'm saying right now to you is that how have you seen this with your natal charts? Because people are very much like, curious, not enough to, or enough, I should say, to either pick up a book that relates to a philosophy and understanding, maybe spirituality. I think a lot of people now know that a lot of the motivational speakers blend into a lot of the spiritual speakers. And because a lot of the language is about understanding that you are not your thoughts, or if you give your thoughts a certain amount of energy, things will come to fruition, whether it's good or bad. All these things become this blend. And I think it pushes people to an area of, I need to find direction as to what these things are and how they apply to my life right now, because it does feel like it's moving in such a fast pace. And so with all of that, natal charts fall into that, in my opinion, of wanting to be curious as to how can I do better and how can I understand how not to trip over myself. Do you see that a lot right now with natal charts, where people are coming to you more in the, not necessarily insecure fashion, but more of like a, hey, I was thinking about doing this, but now I'm like fully invested because like I need to know what's going on with me and the surrounding world. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. And that's something I've seen as a pattern from the very beginning, because it's such a personal connection with the idea of application and unique individual application, which is so key. One thing that we've started, and we're actually like making a whole subsection for it, is I've seen a rise in people's interest in getting natal charts done for their children. and kind of going through that. That's been one of the most amazing things, because that really allows for us to, set up those parameters of like, hey, how do they need to take like advice, and how do they need to take direction? Well, it can kind of give us that proactive lens there. And so that's been a really great thing, because I mentioned that in one of the podcasts, and then a lot of people kind of like showed interest into that. And so we're actually going to like create something for that as a specific thing that is probably going to get like launched today as just like natal chart for your child. And because there's certain houses that you're going to focus on. We'll look at like work and career, but that will be more of like, this is what they might be, interested and good at. Like, this is how they'll kind of work, but not as like significant as like the first 6 houses that we'll be kind of looking at as like, who is the me in there for them. But either way, man, it's a really great thing.
That's cool.
Yeah. You know, what's really funny is like the patterns of like, I'll just have like a random day, and everybody I do that day will be like Gemini rising. And I'll be like, so interesting. Like, why was it when they chose it that they chose Gemini risings, all chose this one day? So there's like really kind of just like interesting patterns that I won't get the answer to, but that's okay, because having questions that we can't get answers to are amazing. Like, that's part of it. It's having questions that we're not allowed to, it's having answers that we can't question. That's where we get, that's where we start to violate natural law, and we start to get into trouble. And so it's been amazing, man, working with the natal charts, seeing those cycles and patterns, and really coming up with personal plans of action and application, because you could be a Capricorn with like Neptune and Uranus in that house. Well, yeah, you need discipline, but it's a really unique way that you need to do discipline. It's not going to be quite like everybody else's discipline. So it helps navigate like where we are in the fun house of mirrors, right? If we're back at the Carnival, we're at that fun house of mirrors where you're looking and you're bent in all those different shapes. Well, imagine that like the universe is that light that's like emanating you to see in there. And it's everybody else is seeing their own shape in a completely unique way because they're in a different place in that fun house of mirrors. Well, that's what this kind of is. It's a fun house of mirrors where we're seeing this component of this creation in front of us. And it's like where we stand is really specific for how those universal energies try to connect to us. And not only is it that we need to learn these energies, but we've been blocking them all of our life, because we were told that they were just something for like the last page of the newspaper, or it was a dead science. But it's just like, no, this is the science of like your awareness. And we can use other, of course, esoteric sciences to help with that. But for the idea that we came here with no instructions, because I've like kind of said that before, it's really not that true. We have the Hermetic laws, we have alchemy, we have astrology, we have mysticism, we have yoga, we have Yoda too. So that's part of it.
We do got
Yoda too, and he's pretty cool. I mean, like, yeah. So, all of those things, great spiritual teachers. And, one of the things that I kind of wanted to, when it comes to application, I heard this story recently and I wanted to pass it on because it's like one of my favorites. And so there is some sort of spiritual teacher, some sort of holy man. I don't think this is a true story. It could be a true story, but I've always heard it like somebody's first explained it to me as Gandhi, but I think you could put the Buddha. I think you could put Jesus. You could put anybody there, right? And what it is like this mother comes up with her child, and she walks up with the child to the spiritual teacher, and let's just say it's Gandhi, and she's just like, my child won't stop eating sugar. Tell him to stop eating sugar. He looks at the mother. He looks back at the child, and he goes back to the mother and he says, come back in 3 days. And the mother's kind of like bothered. She's like, well, I traveled here. Like, we took a day to come here. You want me to come back in 3 days? Like, okay. So they go back home. They come back in 3 days and they walk up. And she's like, as soon as they're walking up and they stand in front of him, he looks at both of them and he looks at the child and he's like, stop eating sugar. And the mother's like, what? Why couldn't you just tell us that 3 days ago? And the spiritual teacher looks up. He's like, I had to stop eating sugar. Like, I had to do the things that I said I was going to. Like, I can't tell your son to do one thing and then I don't do it. Like, I had to actually put it into application before I could actually share this as like proper wisdom and expect for him to like gain that trust, because with me saying something without me doing it, it's in violation of that natural law. And so he's just like, no. And so again, it's kind of comes in with that idea of application. Everything has to start with us.
Awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, man.
You know,
Oh, I like that story.
all roads have to lead back to Rome, which means like everything that we do needs to teach us about ourselves. And then it's part of the great work. And so when people are like, oh, when you say like, oh, the greatest treasure in the world is self-knowledge, people will be like, well, no, my greatest treasure in the world is my children. It's like, well, no, through your children, you learn that you could love in a way you never thought possible. Through your children, you learn sacrifice in a way that you never thought possible. It taught you about your sacrificial nature. It taught you about your loving nature. It taught you about your protection. Same thing with all of our other relationships. Same thing with our jobs and our career. If it's coming back to you and it's teaching you about something, it's part of the great work. So everything is connected in that network. It just depends how many roads we're actually leading back to that Rome, which is like return on me. How much energy is coming back that we actually learn about ourselves. And it's not just going out into the ticket counter at the Carnival to see if you get a Dr. Seuss hat. Like it's not doing that. It's just like, it's not just about the games. It's about returning that energy back to us. And so, just a unique kind of thing to kind of meditate with that whole conversation of like meaning and motion.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. I love talking to you, man. I really do, because like everything you're saying, especially like even the little, not proverb, but the little story you just gave, this is, I think, what I would enjoy the most out of someone like a teacher, just sort of, putting themselves in a position of explaining, I am human too, and I have to abide by these ideas in order to give the example that you need in order to do what we hope you can do as a better person. And I think that that's what's always difficult. It's easy to talk about, it's easy to wonder, but the application does come from the struggle. You know what I mean? You will only put things into motion when you really need to dig yourself out. And I think that we don't have to go that far into falling in a hole that, makes us use the most, intense parts of the corners of our mind as to how to get out of that situation, whether it be with ingenuity or hoping and praying for someone to come and rescue you out of there. I think that the application can be done in doses. It can be done in like small, periods of your life. And again, that's why I was asking about the natal charts, just because I'm always curious, is like, what is, in a nutshell, I know it's a small percentage of people for the world that is in terms of scale that are still coming to you for some sort of advice in regards to their children or their own natal chart, because it tells you a lot about what people might be going through. And so that's why I was going with that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I really can't wait to get back to the tarot, though. I know that's what's coming up next. And that always has a lot of things that I can definitely incorporate to questions that I might have not covered today. But it's nice that I can, at least explore all these different small experiences, some intense and some very clear, with you continuously, man. And for those who are here still listening, thank you for having an interest in, our related experience between friends, Daniel and I, that is, and the understanding of this esoteric path that we all sort of want to learn more about from various teachers and giants before us.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, on that fact, for just like thanking people to listen, you know what? If you are still listening, I'm going to drop a little bonus code. What should the promo code be, Eduardo? Tell me the first promo code that comes to your mind right now.
The Sunday.
How about we call it Sunday? Because it's like because it just has to be like one word. How does Sunday sound? Well, you know what? I can't speak for you. I'm not my brother's keeper. You tell me what promo code you want. Now that I shouldn't be the one that decided. I asked for your attention.
No, I like Sunday. I mean, that's what the first thing that came to my mind, and it always feels like it's going to have some attachment to a more relaxed approach. So
okay.
If I had promo code Sunday.
Yeah.
Today's Wednesday, but I like Sunday because it reminds me of where I might have been on that day when I meet with Daniel.
Sure, absolutely. No, Sundays they're good. It's the day of the sun, The sun has risen. And so Sunday it is. So the first 10 people that hear this that do want a natal chart, for Sunday, use the promo code Sunday, one word, and you'll save 35%. We'll just go like a big one. I like that. I like that, like rewarding people for making it through the entire episode. Even though you do what you want, you don't have to listen to me. Like if you guys want to listen to 15 minutes, like I tip my hat to you. But either way, man, this has been fantastic. And so we'll continue the Tarot, and we'll proceed with the Chariot, as well as, other things that we wanted to talk about. I know we have some films that we want to break down, and I'm excited about that. So we'll kind of jump into that.
Cool, man. Well, until next time, my friend.
Until next time. Too, because it was like I joined a fight club. So like I know I probably shouldn't talk about it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, man.
That would be the coolest, man. I would believe you.
I would start the fight club. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just
Let
kidding.
me in.
No. It would be a high five club for sure.
No, you would be the guy that would find a resourceful way to make an insane amount of money with, some commodity. Because if you haven't read the book by, I think it's Chuck Palahniuk, there's a character there that Daniel's talking about who has that all. And one of the things he does is I think he uses
from like the soap. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Soap.
Tyler Durden.
Yeah. I feel like I'm not saying you would do something so gruesome, but I think you would be like the guy who's just, yeah, I got this operation. It's pretty good. I'm like, can I come see it? And you're like, you don't want to see it, but it's going
You tap
good.
it into
I'm
my,
like,
but hey, I got a funny bloodline with Italians. I'm just kidding. We can cut that too. We can definitely cut that. But yeah, no, man, what were we just talking? Oh, okay. Let's go back to the thing of changes. Yeah.